Hello and welcome. This is In the Running, Rappler's series of panel discussions for the 2025 elections. I'm Pira Nada, Rappler's Head of Community. So, the campaign period for the national elections has begun. It started last Tuesday, February 11, and the latest survey numbers released just before February 11 say the slate endorsed by President Marcos will dominate the 12 Senate seats up for grabs. It's not even been a week since campaign started, but already we've seen a lot of spectacle and even bluster. This election will largely be a contest between allies of President Marcos on one side and those of former President Rodrigo Duterte on the other. And of course, there's a lot going on in between as well. So let's talk to our reporters who've been out there covering all of this action. Bea Cupin and Bons Magsambol cover the senatorial slates. Dialing in are John Sichon, our reporter in the Visayas. Also, Rappler's Mindanao Bureau Chief Herbie Gomez. They cover the election scene in their regions. And joining us live later, Iya Gozum, who is at the campaign launch of labor leaders Leody de Guzman and Luke Espiritu in Quezon City. That's happening as we speak. We also have here in the studio John Neri, veteran journalist and Rappler columnist who hosts our show in the public square. Joining us on the phone later are Dwight De Leon, who covers the Progressive Party Makabayan, and Michelle Abad, who covers the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC. To start off the discussion, we want to share this piece. It's from Rappler's sister company, Nerve. They're a data forensics firm. Nerve did a survey among 2,700 Rappler readers on what issues they consider important for the elections. So what actually came out were the top three issues, namely corruption, education, and inflation. And one of the things that also came out there was voters actually value, of all things, competence, honesty, integrity. And those were some things that came out that now we know from voters, at least Rappler readers. So I want to start, Sir John, with your take on this. Like, we know now what voters want, at least a certain segment. Have you, as you've been looking through the campaign speeches, maybe observing what's been happening at the launch of campaign period, do you hear the candidates talking about these issues?
Well, I think that it's important for us to know how the voters see themselves. That's always a good foundation. But I think we also need to receive, their answers from the perspective that these are aspirational. So they say, for instance, they want someone with a, proven track record. Lito Lapid, to give an example, has been a senator more than once. He's not exactly on the same level as let's say Joel Villanueva, and yet people see him as senatorial material, and they're poised to return him to the Senate. My point is that I think many people will say, yeah, this is what I want, but certain day-to-day conditions will maybe force their hand somehow. Yeah. And so the results might be a little different from what we might expect.
And I think it's also a matter of who do they know.
That's right.
Syempre, to carry over your example, Lito Lapid, artista dati, grabe yung hiyawan sa kanya sa lawag, but we'll talk about that a little more later, I think, yeah.
So, but in the what we've heard from candidate speeches, itong top three, at least, yung corruption, education, inflation, did any of these topics become like consistent topics in the campaign speeches that you've heard?
Yes, actually for Bam Aquino. Like he's running under the platform libreng edukasyon, trabaho, sigurado trabaho. Yeah.
Parang common thread in general among any senatorial candidate would be social services in general, but they don't talk about how we're going to fund them. So the promise is always, we're going to provide more free libreng hospital, checkups, etc., addressing education, but there's never actually, hindi kompleto yung diskusyon. So walang discussion on how are we going to fund this, ano yung mga services na mawawalan ng budget in lieu of education. Corruption is also, parang napansin ko mas may emphasis sa corruption with the Duterte slate so far. To the point of being extreme, as in reintroducing death penalty, etc. But that will also reflect on the overall messaging ng slates nila, I think.
And yun na nga, when they mention about values and characteristics of what they want to see in candidates, I think we also have to put into perspective, are these the candidates they want? Will they actually get elected given the phenomenon of vote buying that we see is already starting? So, Sir John, what would you say to this? Do you think that, what's the likelihood of...
Yeah, so, but before that, I'd like to say that I think most candidates we know actually run on these, we can call them platitudes. No? I will end corruption, promote education.
I am for social services.
In American politics, there's a term called bomb fog, no? Brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. It's so parang platitudinous. It doesn't really mean anything, right? So I think Rodrigo Duterte broke the mold in that, really people really responded to him, talking tough. I did cover one election in 2004 when Jambi Madrigal went around the Philippines saying, because her jingle I think was with Juday and her main pitch was, if I win, I'll come back here, I'll bring Juday. Right? But in that sense, she was unusual. All the others spoke about, we need to raise the quality for education, we need to stop corruption. So very, very few candidates actually want to tell you exactly what you want to hear. Yeah. Like, okay, bring Juday to our town.
And I think it's important to emphasize those, ito nga mga ideals kasi to remind people na in the face of someone offering you money, diba? Versus the future that, what would voting this candidate mean? It's important to start, I think, the campaign season on that note.
Yeah. But I think we should also stress that for many of us, the ability of a politician to offer money is a sign of strength.
Yeah.
And they say, dito ako. Kasi if something happens to me, I can always run. These people, ganun eh.
Concrete na they have your back.
I don't think many of us see it as a weakness. Na, tagilid siya dito kaya siya namimigay ng pera. No, it's the exact opposite. And we need to come to terms with that.
Yeah. So we're going to dive deep into the campaign launches that we saw this past week, no? And I'm very lucky to have reporters who are actually on the ground there. So Bea, you covered PDP's kickoff event. This was in San Juan, and I wanted to ask you, kasi nandun si President Duterte, former President Duterte, what struck you the most in that coverage?
You talked about this off air actually. One is, kumbaga, it's his return to the national stage. He's been quite elusive the past 3 years, right? But he was strong, but it's not the usual bluster that you hear from Duterte, right? Years back, he would be more
fiery,
politically incorrect. Well, he was still politically incorrect. But what struck me the most was, he was reading off a prepared speech or prepared talk points. And I think he was disciplined enough, as much as you can get Duterte to be disciplined enough, to hit yung major talk points, which I think was for him to highlight the coalition, for the coalition through him, to highlight yung what they say, and well, at least in one aspect, yung weakness ng Marcos administration, primarily with the price of goods.
Okay.
Right? Paulit-ulit, in-emphasize niya yung price of rice, referencing yung promise ni President Marcos in 2022 to bring down the price of rice down to 20 pesos per kilo. That's one thing. He also emphasized jobs. And those are noteworthy kasi based on Pulse Asia surveys consistently through the years. Usually, ito talaga yung top 2 or top 4 yung concerns ng Filipinos. And of course, because he's Duterte, siningit niya yung crime.
Yeah.
And it was quite soft, no? Hindi niya, sinabi niya, even the way that he lambasted the administration, sabi niya, falling short of their promises. Hindi na palpak. Di ba you would expect more fiery language from the former Davao Mayor? Oo, di ba? Meron pa siya mga rhetoric na parang, hindi ko sinasabing kaya ko, ha? Hindi ko sinasabi ko ako sa Malacanang, kaya ko tong isolve. Pero meron siyang banat na parang, pero parang this admin doesn't seem to know how to solve the problem. So it's interesting. And I think that also reflects the reality na President Marcos and Sara Duterte, the Vice President, they're halos same lang yung popularity and approval ratings nila. So you cannot also fully antagonize the Maka-Marcos or the solid Marcos base in the same way that the Marcos slate, not so much President Marcos himself, will not want to fully antagonize the pro-Duterte or the solidly Duterte voter. Parang ganun.
Among the candidates, kasi it's a 9-person slate, am I right?
Yes.
Hindi siya complete 12.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Sino among that slate received the biggest reaction from the audience?
Well, I mean, the fierier orators of the slate would be, surprisingly, Vic Rodriguez, who's an interesting personality. Kasi syempre, siya yung pinakaunang executive secretary ni President Marcos and the most short-lived executive secretary in modern history. He was quite mas pointed yung gigil niya. I guess you can say, towards the current administration. Senator De La Rosa was also quite fiery. And I think because it also, kasi parang siya yung pinakatinamaan ni President Marcos in the kick-off rallies, right? Blood on their hands from Tokhang.
That's right.
Yung version na sinabi ni Marcos naman sa Carmen, I think, was extrajudicial killing sa talaga yung ginamit niyang word. So, clearly, siya yung pinakaunang target. Kumbaga ng speech ni President Marcos, we'll talk about that a little more later, na in contrast to Duterte, who was tamer than usual, Marcos was fired up, right? For someone who's known for his politeness and respectability politics na he's been, pushing forward.
I'm curious if yung Sara Duterte impeachment figured at all in the Duterte slate's launch.
The candidates did,
Okay.
but weirdly enough, former President Duterte himself did not mention it at all. As in, wala ni isang mention that my eldest daughter has been
Basic,
impeached by the 19th Congress or by the House of Representatives. But the candidates, the 9 candidates, in one way or another, emphasize na parang yung pitch nila ay kailangan mailuklok kami sa Senate. One, because we need to have the numbers to further our agenda, which is basically to parang safeguard against the Marcos administration, ganon. Pero meron ding pahapyaw na, kasi we also need the numbers to protect the Vice President, to make sure na hindi siya mahatulan if and when the impeachment trial commences.
John, do you think that would be strategic for the Duterte slate to bank on this parang we need to mobilize, unify for Sara? Would that work for voters?
I actually think that's a unifying factor for the Duterte senatorial candidates. Raise the possibility that the heir apparent is in danger. Neutrality be damned. No? I mean, they're saying if they get to the Senate, they will vote to protect Sara. And in terms of consolidating their base, I think that will work.
Si Sara didn't make any showing at all in that.
No, actually, nung nangyayari yung campaign, yung sortie ng PDP laban, there were photos being circulated on social media that she was in Japan together with her sister, Kitty Duterte. And at the same time, pero nung nangyari yung PDP laban sortie, that was the first time actually that the Vice President publicly endorsed the
Yun na yun,
PDP
no?
laban. Yeah, that was the first time.
Pero binasa lang
Statement
ng
lang yan.
post. Kasi naalala ko, kasi yung post was like, may message from Vice President Sara Duterte.
Duterte.
Akala ko naman, oh my God, baka may
Mag-a-appear siya
video.
or video
So
message.
paglingon ko, ay, literally may pubmat lang
Yeah,
na
may
binasa.
pubmat.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Diba?
I mean, in the midterms under her father,
Yeah.
Sarah had her own
slate.
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Pagpong
And
pagbaba.
she was only mayor of
Yeah.
Province.
Sige, thank you so much, Bea, for those interesting information. We'll go back to you in a bit to talk about Alianza's campaign. So, joining us now is Iya Gozom, live from Quezon City for the campaign launch of Labor leaders Leody de Guzman and Duke Espiritu. So, we're going to show Iya live now. Oh, okay. So, Iya is not yet we have some tech issues to deal with, but we will go to Iya right away after those are resolved. So, siguro we can talk more about, yung PDP launch and what else.
Oh, the venue, Pia.
Yes.
At Club Filipino. Club Filipino. Pero yung weird sa akin, kasi nga, syempre, when we found out it was Club Filipino, I jumped at the opportunity to cover that because at
Yeah,
Club,
the symbol.
where Cory Aquino took her oath as president, where the late Benigno Aquino III
Also
announced
announced his
diba?
candidacy.
It's a venue associated with the Liberal Party, with the yellow faction of politics. Pero weirdly enough, during the PDP launch, it was only former ES Middledea who mentioned the historical significance. Tapos parang by the way lang. Parang ganun pa yung pagkasabi niya, parang alam niyo na yan. Alam niyo na yung historical significance. It's parang none of the 9 candidates acknowledged the choice of venue. Neither did former President Duterte. So parang,
Oh, weird.
yeah.
Or parang they won't say the obvious. It's just parang subtle.
Maybe they let the unspoken remain unspoken.
Right.
But that's interesting too.
Baka they don't want to remind of the Liberal Party. They don't want to, maybe, I don't know. Okay, sige. So I think Iya's mic is good. We can now ask Iya some questions about where she is. So, hello Iya, kamusta naman dyan? What's the mood there right now? What's happening?
Hi, Pia. So, kaka-start pa lang nitong proclamation rally ni Lodi de Guzman and Luke Espiritu. So, actually, hindi pa naman sila nagsa-start na mag-speech dito, although nagpa-interview na sila with reporters. Nag-march sila from Quezon Avenue going here. This morning, si Lodi de Guzman ay nagkaroon ng house-to-house campaign sa Barangay Central in a bid to solidify their mass base. So, ganun yung strategy nila for this campaign season. They're consolidating their mass base muna, no, si Luke Espiritu na naglibot siya sa universities, no, using his charm for his Gen Z audience. And yon, so medyo a week later yung kanilang proclamation rally, no, yung kanilang kick-off, right? A week later after nagkaroon ng kick-off rallies, yung mga ibang slates. So ang mood dito, the people here are organized based of Luke and Lodi, yung mga nakausap natin kanina na supporters and campaign staff are approaching this election season kind of sober but hopeful. Yung isa ko nakausap, sabi niya, when I asked him if they think Luke and Lodi will actually win given their dismal rankings in the latest Pulse Asia survey, sabi niya, it's not an impossibility. Pia?
Okay, so interesting yan, no? Kasi you did mention the low survey numbers. They are very much far from the magic 12 in the surveys. So I wanted to ask, no, besides being hopeful, what is their strategy naman to make sure na at least may winning chance by the end of the campaign season?
So far, what I've gathered here is, aside from going to their mass base para ma-consolidate yung votes nila, they're focusing on a particular messaging, no, which is the anti-political dynasties, which their team thought na very matunog sa masa. So actually, they kind of try to approach this election, this campaign season, no, using gut issues, no, given na they're labor leaders, their community organizers, grassroots ang hinahawakan talaga nila. So pagtaas ng presyo ng bigas, jobs, yun ang kanilang focus at the start. And then eventually around August, September, they shifted into this anti-political dynasty messaging na nakita nila ay matunog sa mga tao, and they hope na this will further garner popularity for both these figures. So far, yun pa lang yung nakikita natin. At narinig natin sa mga nakausap natin, no, and how they're trying to approach this campaign and boost their dismal rankings in the surveys.
John Bayabons, baka may questions kayo for Ian.
Are they thinking of building alliances, joining other Senate slates, for instance? I'm not sure if you heard that.
I think may lag.
Okay, you hear us?
Can you repeat the question?
Baka ikaw
Yeah.
din.
Yeah.
Am I the only one Ian
Yeah.
can hear? Okay, I will repeat na lang John's question. So, John is asking if because of this low numbers, meron bang strategies na Lodi and Luke Espiritu to form alliances with other parties or groups?
Sorry, Pia, can you repeat the question? Nag-start na yung program dito, medyo malakas yung...
Okay, no problem. So, John was asking if may strategy ba si Luke and Lodi to join forces with other groups?
Okay. So, kanina I asked Luke if they're endorsing. Yun pa muna yung question ko, not even consolidating with other opposition candidates. But he said, so far ngayon, ang ina-endorse pa lang niya ay si Lodi de Guzman. I think maybe open naman sila for talks with other opposition lists. Let's see where this campaign season goes.
Just a quick question lang. I
Yes.
think,
Okay.
hopefully she can hear me because I'm close to you. I'm just curious kasi we all know it takes millions and millions to mount a national campaign, right? How will funding work for the two candidates? Or will this be like a genuine grassroots campaign na talagang relying on volunteers, I'm guessing, to help them out?
Yes. Yes, that's how this campaign of Luke and Lodi is appearing, no. Wala silang heavy machinery.
Yeah.
They don't have the same resources as the other slates. So they keep repeating they're banking on their social media presence and yung mga pag-guest nila sa mga debates at yung mga sarili nilang pag-iikot. So yun, it's an uphill battle for them. But again, as one of the campaign staff said, winning it's not an impossibility.
Yeah. Bonds, may question ka ba for Iya?
Okay. Yung question ko, nabanggit yung open sila to consolidate with other opposition candidate. Sa part kasi ni Kiko and Bam, they already they have been branding themselves as independent. Ayaw nilang ma-brand as opposition. At some point ba, although sinabi ni Kiko na, ni Bam, na open naman daw sila makipag-usap. Lumapit na ba yung dalawang kandidatong ito sa iba pa mga opposition candidates? I don't know if
So ESC Bonds is asking kung lumapit na ba si Leody and Luke Espiritu to other candidates and how do they use yung, for example, si Kiko and Bam say independent candidates sila, ganun rin ba yung messaging nila Leody and Luke Espiritu?
We haven't heard yet of any news kung lumapit na yung camps ni Luke and Leody sa kampo nila Kiko and Bam, but I've been speaking with Leody earlier sa Barangay Central, and from the looks of it, I don't think the two camps are speaking to each other now.
Okay, so salamat Iya. We'll leave the Leody Luke rally for now, but if you want to keep receiving live updates from Iya and the rest of our team, we invite you to download our app and visit the Philippine Politics chat room. You can also ask questions or post your comments there. So yung QR code ay pinapakita ngayon sa screen. So now, joining us are John Sichon in Cebu and Herbie Gomez in Cagayan de Oro, and of course, Bea here. They all covered the campaign launches of President Marcos' late, Lawag in Luzon on Tuesday, Iloilo in the Visayas on Thursday, and Davao del Norte in Mindanao on Saturday. So yun, so these three, you were on the ground. What are your key takeaways from those three events? Maybe we can start with John. So Iloilo, di ba?
I think he has some audio issues.
Hello? Ayan.
There we go.
Okay, yeah. As I was saying, from the looks of it, we're seeing a more confrontational approach coming from the president. The way that his speech, just like what Bea said a while ago, primarily targets allies ni Duterte, sila ni Senator Bato de la Rosa, with, of course, pointing out na may bahid with the whole Tokang and the drug war. But these are things that are very interesting coming from the president, primarily because he's been a little bit quiet about these issues for quite some time, especially when the ICC started coming in the country. But nevertheless, I think what we need to look at is how, while the president is doing this kind of approach, we take a look at the senators during these rallies and how they're presenting themselves. Here in Iloilo, in Iloilo, when we were there, we noticed that from the first candidate all the way to the last, there's always an attempt to speak the language. I think that's practically the way most of these sorties go, with candidates trying to pander with the locals. But it's worth pointing out as well that the second kickoff rally happened in Iloilo because there's a lot of connection. There's a lot of connection with the First Lady and the province of Iloilo as well, primarily because her grandparents, her father, hailed from Iloilo. It's also very interesting how in this province, in Panay, in the Panay Island, how when you're in Iloilo, of course, there's it's the hometown of some very big names coming from the Liberal Party, like Franklin Relon, former Senate President. And when you go all the way north, you reach Capiz, you have Mar Rojas, which, as it turns out, is actually a second cousin to the First Lady. So there's a lot of reclaiming, filial roots here in the Western Visayas part of their campaign for Visayas. And what's even quite quite a pivotal point for their campaign is how they're trying to woo voters that primarily did not vote in favor of the president that's given them their graces, that's anointed them as part of the Alianza para sa Bagong Pilipinas slate. So we're seeing how not only are they trying to tap into those ancestral roots, they're trying to pander to the locals. They're also trying to pander to the locals in such a way that they don't utilize the same mechanics, or at least the way that speeches are phrased for their opponents. But they're also very much aware that they're not in a Marcos country. It's a country that vastly voted for the likes of the then presidential candidate and former Vice President Leni Robredo and Kiko Pangilinan. So those are the primary observations that we got in their second kickoff rally in Iloilo City.
Jumping to Mindanao, Herbie, the last stop of the alliance was in Davao del Norte. It's not quite Davao City, but still this is Mindanao. What does this have to say about the Alianza, and ano yung message that they want to put out by holding that last event there?
In Davao del Norte, I'm taking note that among the provinces, so this excludes Davao City, among the provinces in the Davao region, Davao del Norte has the most number of voters. It has 721,000 plus voters. So that accounts for about 21% of the voters in that region. Now, in Mindanao, excuse me, in Mindanao, the Davao region also top when it comes to the voting population, followed closely by Northern Mindanao. So that's strategic. And take note that the Davao region is that's Duterte country. So when they staged the rally there yesterday, you could see that as sending a political message. We're not afraid of you. Pero hindi nila ginawa sa Davao City. Apparently, siguro because they're avoiding tension. So they chose Davao del Norte, number one, because among the, as I said a while ago, among the provinces in the Davao region, yan ang pinakamaraming boto. And why the second district? Kasi yung second district is where Anton Lagdameo used to be congressman.
Right.
So, di ba? Although the governor is an ally of Pantaleon Alvarez, who's a staunch supporter of Duterte, pero yung second district medyo kontrolado nila. So, yun ang strategy doon.
Pag-usapan natin yung role ni President Marcos as the chief campaigner in all of these events and all of these campaigns. Ano yung pinaka-consistent messaging niya that you three heard really repeated? Like, it's really the message he wants to send out to everyone who attends these rallies. What would that message be?
I think yung not just the message, no, pero the way he's framing the elections, he does not want it to be a referendum on his administration, for sure. Especially because they're doing, at least based on perception, pangit yung performance sila in addressing inflation. Nakita ko yung number, 71%, disagree around that figure. It's quite high.
Yeah.
Traditionally, nasa 40-50% lang yung who do not approve of the administration's handling of inflation. So, what does he do? So far, this might evolve, pero yung so far, what he wants to do is to frame the elections as a choice between the current Philippines, quote-unquote, bagong Pilipinas niya, or the past, which he has painted as a pro-China past, a past where leaders have their hands bloodied from the drug war, a past where leaders very specific siya, corruption from the pandemic. Hindi lang corruption in general, corruption from the pandemic. So parang kumbaga, this is very understandable for an administration not to want a midterm to be a referendum of their performance. Especially
To
nga,
divert attention.
kasi tagilid sila sa inflation. I think may tacit na rin na admission yun, no, na parang he's not even saying so far sa campaign pitch na, we're already addressing this. It's more of really choose where do you want the Philippines to turn back in time and go back to the years of Rodrigo Duterte. And again, to contrast to Duterte, what he's saying is, evaluate nyo ngayon. Evaluate nyo ngayon yung current administration. Are you able to walk the streets at night? Are you able to afford your food? Are you able to find jobs? So parang very, very clear yung contrast. And you know, in contrast to Duterte, who we saw a tame version of in Club Filipino, that was the fieriest I've seen President Marcos since he ran for the presidency in 2022 all the way up to the presidency. Nagdagulat ako frankly na parang, he went there, right?
Biglang nag-activate siya.
Yeah, I mean, understandable siya in Lawag kasi baluarte niya yun eh. Diba, kumbaga, he was already preaching to a convinced choir. But I was surprised that he stuck to the same stump speech in Davao. So talking pala about the three choices for the kickoff, parang uso na rin ngayon for ruling coalitions and even yung mga opposition to try to launch, as long as they have the resources, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. Pero very pointed din nga yung choice ng Lawag, Iloilo, and Carmen. Again, Lagdameo, the bailiwick of SAP, Lagdameo, a province where not only the FL has First Lady has roots, they went to Iloilo twice in 2022, which is in contrast with Cebu, na traditionally doon ka tututok, di ba? Once lang sila nangampanya sa Cebu.
Bakit
But
kaya?
last time, it was Iloilo twice, right? Different districts pa. So parang merong special place din si Iloilo in the Marcos milieu, I guess. And then, obviously, Lawag, kasi what they wanted to emphasize was, baluarte ito. And I think on a personal level, it also gives an extra boost for the president. Na kumbaga, wala ka nang, this crowd is totally sold. Not just to the president, but whoever the president will endorse, because of course, this is Marcos' country.
I wonder, John and Herbie, if strategic ba yung ginagawa ni Marcos to avoid the gut issues, the economy, inflation, and instead talk about China, talk about corruption during pandemic, etc. Will this resonate with voters in Iloilo and Davao del Norte, or even in the Visayas and Mindanao in general?
Yun nga napansin ko, no? Kasi magbabackfire sa kanya yun eh. Got issues ito eh. Sinisingil siya ngayon on for example, yung campaign promise niya in 2022 or to lower the rice price to 20 a kilo. Obviously, we're not saying that. So, how can he, ano yung authority niya to speak about this issue? So, iniba niya. So, he would rather focus on the bloodshed that took place during the time of Duterte. Of course, in China issue. Pero syempre, nakita ko rin sa Davao I was monitoring it yesterday. And I took note na ang medyo kumunek doon si Manny Pacquiao. Because he spoke about his experience before he rose to fame, no? When sabi niya there were times wala silang breakfast, walang lunch, and then sabi ng nanay sa kanila, uminom kayo ng maraming tubig. And then he spoke in Bisaya, and I heard people clapping when he did that. So medyo kumunek siya doon. So Pacquiao spoke about gut issues. Ewan ko if it would be effective kay BBM to speak about this topic. Kasi magbabackfire sa kanya eh.
John, from Visayas.
Well, the whole alliance has laid the senatorial aspirants do tackle these issues in pressers. There are some keynotes that they would lay out, like say for example, livelihood programs, the usual infrastructures that they'd be building to help farmers, or at least those that don't have proper homes. But for the president to do such a thing would be like walking on a landmine. I think we have to recognize that the voters are vastly different from each other, and so what I theorize what they're trying to do for countries that, well, for provinces that traditionally didn't vote for Marcos as well versus Duterte, that approach of trying to present himself as the lesser evil as opposed to Duterte na bahid ng tokhang, is his way of getting those votes that they were not able to get in the previous national election. So I think that's why they're going for that kind of approach in these provinces specifically.
Okay. John, would you want to ask the last question for Alianza?
Well, no, I was just going to say that if I could argue with both Herbie and John that maybe it is a strategic decision on the part of Marcos to, in fact, shape the elections as a referendum on the Duterte.
Yeah.
And use those three issues, corruption, China, and EJKs, as a way to finally defeat the Dutertes.
Right.
So, of course, they're running a risk, right? As Herbie said, if people are going to vote based on yung sa sikmura nila, medyo tagilid siya. But these three issues actually have a large base, no? The one major issue that Duterte was not able to convince the public on was his pivot to China.
Yeah.
Even throughout his presidency, right? 3/4 of Filipinos said we need to be more assertive. EJKs, we had a divided country. People liked what was happening, but at the same time they thought that they would be the next victim and so on. So may traction. And then corruption, I think people will say, so even in our nerve, no? People would say they want to fight against corruption. So yun nakikita ko. Hindi ko na alam kung on the ground, no? It's seen that way, Herbie and John, no? Pero sa tingin ko, Marcos is waging war against the Duterte through his senatorial candidates, or at least the senatorial campaign.
Yeah. And it's interesting also na yung framing niya ng China, it's not just na pro-China sila. Yung phrase niya ay pumapalakpak paata habang wino-water cannon.
So got rin
Guard
kasi
natin
violence
sa West
against
Philippines.
Filipinos.
Yeah, so parang he's also evoking these,
Yeah.
maybe not as effective yet, maybe we'll see this progress, but evoking this image na habang binubuli yung tauhan natin sa dagat, ay pumapalakpak pa kayo para sa China. Well, that's not entirely literal, right? But you get what I mean? Like, he's trying to paint this image. So, it's interesting to me kasi if you talk then to people in the security and defense circles, they actually are eager in turning the West Philippine Sea and China into an election issue. So, we'll see, kasi he has the bully pulpit. I think that's one thing that we have to remember na as much bluster as Duterte can muster, he doesn't have the same clout as one would have when he was president. So that's going to be interesting in the weeks to come. We'll see how the messaging evolves. I don't think, tingin ko naman hindi ito final form ng speech ni Marcos. Baka mag-evolve pa to, depending on how the survey goes, how his candidates fare in the preference survey. So,
Yes, I wonder what Herbie and John also think.
Well, using the drug war as a double-edged sword, definitely. There are voters that we've talked to in Iloilo that actually were very much happy about the war being waged against, civilians. But the way that they framed it was more of, all of these drug addicts are taking away children, the same narrative utilized by Duterte during that time. But they are also aware that under Duterte's administration, and this is some of their confessions, that there were really more of these cases happening under Duterte's time versus Marcos's time. And that's very interesting because there's this admission that there were a lot of these cases under Duterte's time, and yet there was a lot more action done towards these cases. But when we go to Marcos's time, there's fewer cases, but there's not much action towards these problems in society because they are quote unquote coming back. but that's the thing. If Marcos wants to utilize that narrative that the drug war was bad, then he needs to really hit the point home that there were innocents caught in this crossfire between the so-called drug lords and the authorities.
Herbie, last thoughts?
The way I see it, ang calculated yung attacks nila, the senatorial bets won't touch on Duterte.
Yeah.
So they would leave, they leave it to BBM
Yeah.
Makes sense, yeah.
talk about the EJ case, the obsession for bloodshed, China, okay. Pero yung mga senatorial candidates, they would speak about the gut issues. That's how I see it, based on what I saw yesterday. I also took note, and I told Bea, the group last night, I took note that during the press conference that was supposed, ang dapat sumagot ng mga candidates, one question was about why Davao Oriental, why the Davao region, Duterte country. Alam nyo, nagulat ako, ang sumalo si Toby Chanco, who's not, he's the campaign manager, pero ba't ganon? Tapos yung sagot niya, makikita mo he was avoiding, there was no mention of Duterte. Ang sinabi lang niya, motherhood statement how we see all the regions as very important, something like that. So motherhood statement. So I think that's a strategy on their part, on the part of the senatorial because the candidates are the ones who are in need of votes in May, not the BBM. So they would leave the attacking of Duterte to Marcos. That's how I see it.
Salamat, John and Herbie. We're going to be talking to you again when the local campaigns begin on March 28. So now, punta naman tayo kay Bonds. So si Bonds naman, you covered the Pink campaign rally for Kiko Pangilinan and Bam Aquino and the Liberal Party. They did their campaign launch in Cavite, one of the most vote-rich provinces, last Tuesday. So main things we saw from that, they put former VP Leni Robredo front and center, and also they really declared themselves as independent candidates. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, actually, former Vice President Leni Robredo received a rock star welcome, as in the scenes were reminiscent of the 2022 Pink movement. Everyone was so excited, everyone was so hopeful, and everyone was wearing pink. As in, at some point, the crowd was shouting, Leni, Leni, and then she jokingly said, no, hindi ako tatakbo ha, hindi ako tatakbo. And then, all of a sudden, everyone turned emotional. Kasi the last time that they saw the Vice President was in May 13, 2022, during her Thanksgiving. Kahit na hindi siya nanalo, of course, we know na nagkaroon siya ng Thanksgiving. That was the last crowd na nagpakita siya. Pero, in that campaign, of course, itong Kiko Bam tandem, actually, they're banking on the Pink movement. So if you can recall, the Vice President obtained almost 15 million votes during the last election. And if Kiko and Bam will be able to get 15 million votes, parang likely kaya na nilang makapasok sa Magic 12. Because the last senatorial race, of course, si Senator J.V. Ejercito, who ranked number 10, got 15.6 million votes. Of course, we have Senator Risa at 15 million votes. And the 12th placer, Jinggoy Estrada, got 14 million votes. So imagine if these two bets are able to get the kakampinks on their side, likely makakakuha sila ng slot sa Magic 12. But at the same time, actually, itong campaign kick-off kasi nila sa Cavite, may nangyari na event sila sa morning sa UP Chapel. And in that, after that mass, which was attended, of course, by former Vice President Leni Robredo as well, na-ambush namin si Senator Kiko. Ano ba yung greatest lesson mo or yung pinakamagandang lesson na nakuha mo from your 2022 loss? And sabi niya, sana daw yung mga kakamping, huwag silang makipag-away sa mga rival camps. Very important na lesson ito na sinabi ni Senator Kiko because political analysts have long pointed out na parang isang weakness ng campaign yun, ng Lenny. Na yung mga supporters nila, hindi nila makontrol. Di ba? Parang ang nangyayari, nakikipag-bash talaga sila sa social media. Yung tendency nila, parang nang-look down sila ng mga tao na merong differing views sa kanila.
Pero if, yung sabi nga ni Bia, it's like the Marcos camp is trying to paint this as a good versus evil, before versus Duterte, bloodshed versus now, na decent, etc. What then is the role of Kakamping in this war? Parang kung may two sides, where do they place themselves in that battle? And does independent even resonate among voters? Parang when you say, I'm an independent candidate, what does it mean for voters? And is that strategic even?
Actually, hati siya eh. Like, when you look at the social media sentiments, hati siya. Itong two candidates natin, binabrand nila yung sarili nila as independent. But at the same time, yung mga camping,
What do you
We're
stand
the opposition.
for?
Nasaan yung opposition? So kung hindi kayong opposition, sino yung opposition? Kasi if you can recall, di ba, nung naghiwalay na si Marcos at si Duterte, si Sara Duterte, parang sila, they've been branding themselves as alternative opposition. And then may umalma naman sa LP camp. Si former Senator Laila de Lima, sinasabi niya na, bakit kayo opposition? You don't have the qualities of being an opposition. Diba? So ngayon yung mga campings, litong-lito sila. So, saan ba tayong side dito? But at the same time, during that speech naman ni Kiko, sinabi niya doon na I'm willing to work with BBM. It's very telling, di ba? Sabi niya na he's willing to set aside politics. Let's bring down yung presyo ng bigas. Kaya ko makipag-work kay BBM. So very telling yun din sa branding nila na independent kami and at the same time, willing kaming makipag-work sa admin na kalaban nila noong 2022. Right?
So ano yung sinurface nilang voter issues in their speeches? Like, was there something we saw na ito talaga yung messaging nila that will resonate to voters, and how did they frame it?
Siguro yung mga gut issues pa rin. Like for example, sa camp ni Bam Aquino, libreng education pa rin. Kasi paulit-ulit niyang sinasabi na it was me na principal author ng libreng edukasyon. At sabi niya nga doon sa sortie niya sa Cavite, pinasampa niya sa stage yung mga college students from Cavite na parang ito yung mga resibo, ito yung resibo ko, ito yung mga napag-aral ng libreng edukasyon, which I principally authored. Kasi di ba, it was Senator Bam talaga during his time. And then si Kiko naman, yung libreng hello pagkain pa rin siya. Which is parang nakikiride siya talaga doon sa campaign ng alyansa, yung pagpapababa ng presyo ng pagkain.
Did Bam hit Sara Duterte's accomplishments in DepEd, controversies in DepEd?
No. Walang ganong mention. Pero at some point, Senator Bam was asked about the impeachment. So kung makikita nyo yung sa social media, sabi niya hindi ito yung issue na kailangan ng mga tao ngayon for now.
Mga politiko daw.
Issue ng mga politiko. Pero at some point kasi parang medyo nawala ng context yun, naputol. Kasi may sinundot naman siya doon na, pero kapag ako na ang nailoklok niyo sa pwesto, magiging patas ako, magiging fair, kasi magiging judge daw siya in case maging senator siya.
John?
Pero ito yung paradox, I think, lalo na kung nasa magic 14 and plus 4. 14 yung parang winnable ni Pulse. And then you have the dangling 4. Dangling 4. Ako lang may invento nun. Pero yung apat na kumbaga so close but also far is Kiko Pangilinan, Bam Aquino,
Gringo and then
Ben-Hur also is there, and si Tolentino medyo kumakapit sa may baba. Parang yun yung, the irony of their position is that they cannot actually afford to antagonize
anyone,
Duterte.
right?
Yeah.
They need to court both votes, right? But then you have President Marcos and former President Duterte framing the election as a Duterte-Marcos showdown, right? So ang tanong dito na wala akong sagot is, it's a challenge for the in-betweeners, right? Which is exactly right now the Liberal Party or the yellow turned pink coalition. Where do they place themselves? Diba? Parang may notion na if you stand for nothing, if you don't stand for anything, you'll stand for everything. Parang ganon. But that's the thing. So it's going to be a challenge for them. For better or worse, I don't think they've been able to capitalize on the rift of the unit team, right? Kahit na nagkaaway-away na parang, kumbaga hindi sila fully and I think it's an admission na it would also not be to their advantage to be solidly anti-Duterte at this point, right? Kasi para makita mo kahit yung mga slate ni Marcos, they don't want to comment on the impeachment. And I don't think it's a values thing, it's also a strategy thing, right? Yung disclaimer nila, either it's premature to talk about it, that's what Mayor Abby Binay said. Parang, we're advanced masyado mag-isip, let's win this, and then, because if I win this, I will be a senator judge, possibly under the 20th Congress. So they have that solid disclaimer. Interestingly enough, si Erwin Tulfo, who leads the race, di ba sabi niya hindi siya bumoto sa House kasi daw nagli-lead na siya sa survey and therefore he's poised to be a senator judge in the future. So it's this weird tango that the senatorial candidates, except siguro, for the exception siguro of Leody and the likes of Luke, now, yun clearly, they will not hesitate to make a stand on Sara Duterte, no? But all of the other candidates, syempre yung Duterte candidates, obviously pro Sara Duterte sila, they will vote against her impeachment, conviction. But the Alianza slate, it's not in their interest, honestly, to antagonize fully the Marcos vote, the Duterte vote, rather.
I think it's also a recognition that even the branding of opposition has been diminished. No? So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's WR Numero Research that does this. They ask respondents to classify themselves. No? And there's a Marcos siding block. There's a Duterte siding block, and I think the opposition is something like 4 or 5%, if I'm not mistaken. So if you wanna reach the 15 million votes or something, so I agree with you. I mean, it's not. They haven't capitalized on the rift. They are searching for the narrative that will be, and it doesn't help them that while they are within striking distance, it's such a crowded race for the last 4 or 5 slots.
Kasi midterms,
and they don't have the most resources.
Yes. Although Bam was saying that yung branding nila ng pagiging independent, kami yung alternative choice nyo sa dalawang nag-uumpugang bato, which is Marcos and Duterte camp. So yun yung gusto nilang ipakita. Na parang kung pagod na kayo sa dalawang malaking kampo na nag-aaway, nandito kaming dalawa ni Senator Kiko.
That's kind of like Isko Moreno's narrative naman.
exactly.
Lenny versus More.
We all know
Let's see if that will take
Yeah,
root.
No, but it's a challenging message, I think,
It
in
really
Philippine
is. It's
politics, na parang yung rising above the noise, parang mahirap gawin yun sa Philippines.
Because we like the noise, unfortunately.
We thrive.
Yeah, I can think back to 2001 when Noli de Castro, Kabayan, topped the Senate race by a mile.
Yeah.
No? And he did not want to be identified. He was a guest candidate of Puwersa ng Masa, but he didn't really. He campaigned on his own. He was independent. I think that's a different case. No? In that case, he was seen as independent himself and so on. But very, very different. I think the next one was Juan Flavier, and he led Flavier by 4 or 5 million
Actually, the
votes.
case for Erwin right now, right? Malaki yung gap niya sa...
But Bongo and Tito Soto are also. So those those three.
All right. So now we're going to turn to Dwight. Si Dwight naman sinundan niya yung Makabayan candidates around Metro Manila for the campaign kick-off also last Tuesday. And medyo iba yung kanilang strategy for their kick-off. So Dwight, can you tell us what it was like and paano sila tinanggap ng mga tao?
Well, Pia, it was a very humble campaign from Makabayan. They conducted the send-off activity in the morning sa kartilya ng Katipunan in Manila. Actually, dumating ako doon 6:30, 30 minutes before the start. Tinawagan ko pa si Nato Reyes, the campaign manager, president of Bayan. Sabi ko, dito ba yung campaign? Because wala pang tao. And then he said, dyan naman talaga. And then around a few dozen people yung dumating, yung nag-participate sa mini rally nila in the morning before the 11 candidates dispersed around Metro Manila to campaign, mag-house to house. Although sina Liza Masa and another candidate sa Cagayan de Oro conduct ng first rally nila of the campaign. So yung idea is that they can cover more ground. Kapag naghiwa-hiwalay sila, they can spread the message of their campaign, yung mga plataforma nila. It's a grassroots campaign, pero yung karamihan sa kanila nagsimula sa Metro Manila because that is where their base din talaga eh. Tapos, naalala ko, sa hapon, may community rally sila hiwalay din, dalawa. May isa sa Manila, may isa sa Quezon City. Tapos dun sa Quezon City, meron pang isang lola na may nagkaroon sa sharing activity kung kamusta yung first day of pangangampanya. Tapos yung lola, she was like, nalulungkot ako kasi nangangampanya kami, tapos yung mga pinagsasabihan namin sa house to house, tinatanong nila, bakit namin iboboto si Franz Castro? May child abuse conviction yan. So, parang hanggang ngayon, tawag dito, yung reputation ng makabayan, it's still something that they have to grapple with. Yung apprehension ng iba na dahil they're the Philippine left, it's something na parang it's a disadvantage, also a disadvantage for them as we head to the campaign season. Tapos yung kampanya nila, it's not the traditional campaign kasi na yung administration slate, they are welcomed ng mga mayors, ng mga governors kapag bumibisit sila ng provinces. That will be a challenge for makabayan kasi wala naman silang mayor or governor who supports their candidacies. Tapos yung mga pinuntahan pa nila, may isang yung nurse na candidate nila, si Jocelyn Andama, nagpunta sa hospital, si Franz Castro nagpunta sa school. So they're trying to come up with gimmicks to make up for the lack of support by the establishment, yung lack of political machinery nila.
Sige.
Tapos yung isa pang napansin ko ay dahil labing isa silang kandidato, on the first day of the campaign, naninibago sila dahil hindi sila sanay sa ganun eh. Before, isa, dalawa yung pinapatakbo nila. Pero dahil ngayon labing isa, they're struggling with the communications. Parang that's something that they still have to figure out. Parang I remember na kailangan ko pang magtanong, meron po ba kayong directory ng contact details ng on-ground staff ng bawat kandidato? So para madali silang mapuntahan. So dahil yun nga, parang hindi pa yun established sa campaign nila how to coordinate properly or to coordinate better with the media.
Just one question for Dwight, no, because we also have another person lined up to give us updates. Dwight, one thing we can say about Makabayan Bloc, though, is that currently they've been getting a lot of exposure because of their very active role sa mga Congress hearings, like dun sa confidential funds issue ni Vice President Sara Duterte. How does that play into their strategy, and does this now give them credibility to say we are the genuine opposition, and are they using that talking point?
Actually, yun nga, ang funny kasi kanina pinag-uusapan nyo, yung sina Bam, they're rejecting the opposition tag. But here comes Makabayan, which is embracing that tag fully. Sila yung genuine opposition. So it's a question kung bakit hindi siya nagka-catch on, ano? But again, that's also because when you look at the numbers, the numbers of Makabayan sa Pulse Asia, as in, it's very unlikely that kahit isa sa kanila makakapasok sa Magic 12. And siguro part of it, they're banking also sa naging role nga nila sa congressional hearings. Yung Makabayan was among the first to file the impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte. Tapos isa lang sila sa mga complainants na nag-succeed sa House. And now, while they're still excluded in the conversations in the House kasi part sila of the minority, you can sense a certain shift eh. May yung mga press releases nila against Vice President Sara is being carried by the House official email. So may certain level of power, or in a way, parang it's a win-win for both the majority and for Makabayan, because for the majority, yung talking point ng Makabayan, i-carry natin because that's against VP Sara. Yung pusit remark ni Franz Castro against VP Sara, the House majority carried that for weeks. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Tapos yung Makabayan, the candidates even said, some of the candidates even said that if they get elected to Senate, they vow to vote to convict Vice President Sara in a trial. And that's yun nga, katulad ng napag-usapan nila, that's something that will play out, lalo na kung yung trial ay mag-extend sa susunod na Senado. But again, we are looking at the numbers of Makabayan, and it's really, suntok sa buwan talaga if one of them will enter the Magic 12. Lalo pat ngayon, 11 sila naglalabanan din sila sa atensyon eh. Imagine parang doon sa 11 na yun, if you have to focus yung the popular ones, sina Teddy Casino, sina Liza Masa, si Franz Castro, Darlene Rosas as incumbent lawmakers. Yung 7 parang medyo kawawa in a sense na parang you're introducing them to the public pero dahil kakaunti lang yung space sa media, yung attention, parang it's difficult for them to gain traction. Kakapanghinaya nga kasi for example may isa doon na si Danilo Ramos yung magsasaka. He's very charismatic, very articulate, but and dito pa lang hindi pa lang nila kalaban yung ibang kandidato sa slate pa lang nila. Parang hirap nang mag-stand out.
Yeah, that's really
there's 11 of them.
Maraming salamat, Dwight, for those updates. We've been talking about voters, candidates. Ngayon naman, let's talk about the referee between all of these sides and, making sure voters also get the right information, the COMELEC. So, the COMELEC began the campaign period by tearing down campaign paraphernalia in Manila at 4 a.m. last Tuesday. So, si Michelle Abad was there. She was on the ground. And, Michelle, kamusta na ba yung kanilang Oplan baklas? And does the COMELEC have any concerns beyond illegal posters?
Yes, Pia. So they started the COMELEC started the Oplan Baklas. They wasted no time on the very first day of the start of the national campaign period. No, so that was February 11 at 4 a.m. Like you said, the chairperson George Garcia was there himself. He did lead the efforts for some of the first posters to be taken down in Manila. So they started. They had a very early assembly at the Palacio, the COMELEC headquarters at 4 a.m. And they started some of the first takedowns in Tondo, Manila. And the directive for the personnel that were enforcing it were really just to first start with just the national candidates. So that's only the Senate and party list posters. And because the local campaign period has not started yet, which that will be on March 28th. So far, even if they see some illegal materials that don't satisfy the standards of the COMELEC, they can't take it down if it's for a local race. And another directive specifically was for the armed personnel to make sure that they don't take down materials on private property. So among the first posters that we did observe were taken down, at least in that ceremonial takedown with the COMELEC chair. Among the posters were top-ranking senatorial candidate Erwin Tulfo, and then some of the other party list materials that were taken down were of Solid North, Buhay Party List, Axis, and LPG-MA. And what they noticed, or what the COMELEC noticed with these initial materials, was that the size was right, but they were posted in the wrong places because there are regulations for where you're allowed to put campaign materials, and also they were non-biodegradable. And so, on your other question on other concerns, there has been a new modus of scammers, according to COMELEC Chair Garcia, where they're trying to target candidates by promising a sure win by what they call secret shading. So what the modus is, according to the COMELEC, is that they claim to have connections to COMELEC, and they can interfere allegedly with the shading or the printing of the ballots. So there's going to be an invisible shade that they put there on the ballots, and if there's the invisible shade will be on the candidate that paid them. And then if their rival supporters try to shade the other circles, then the ballot will be invalid because there will be two shades. So that came out because there were 3 people that were just recently arrested in Cagayan for offering these scams, and they believe that it's a large syndicate.
Okay. Pero Michelle, realistically, like what actually happens to the candidates who, apart from the fact that their posters are gone now, like, is there any other penalty?
Yeah, so when they remove the posters, they aren't immediately disposed of because the COMELEC has to take down who are these candidates who are violating the rules, and then they have 3 days to take down other materials that are violating the rules, or otherwise they face either disqualification or they could even face imprisonment up to 6 years, according to the COMELEC. But realistically, I did do some searching. I did do some research on how much this has been enforced in previous elections. You don't see a lot, actually. You really just see in past elections that the COMELEC has given the same warnings, but we don't know if candidates actually face these sanctions, although our friends and our colleagues in the regions might know of smaller candidates that do receive these penalties.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Michelle, for those updates. And we know that there's so much more to talk about the campaign launches, but that is all for today's In the Running panel discussion. We have 85 days to go until elections. To help you make the best decision of who to vote for, we have all the information you need in one place, the Rappler election site. So please check it out at ph.rappler.com. It has everything you need. So meron dyang comprehensive election guides, we have explainers, profiles of candidates, both national and local, a newsfeed of all the latest updates on voters' issues and campaign moments. And of course, we invite all of you to help keep our elections honest and clean. You can report election violations to the voter hotline channel, which gives you a direct link to the COMELEC. And if you want to stay updated about the candidates and their campaigns, you can chat with our reporters at the Philippine Politics chat room. So that is all for our discussion, and we of course will be giving you updates on our site. Maraming salamat once again. I am Pia Renada, and just maybe a goodbye from our guests, our resource persons today. Thank you so much for watching In the Running. See you next time. Goodbye.